Welcome to the CD Fitness Podcast, where our mission is to change the way women see themselves in order to show up optimally in all aspects of their life. We aim to improve knowledge, self-love, and the embodiment of the unique self on this earth. We prioritize health and nutrition education as well as coaching to empower women to make healthier decisions to live longer, achieve freedom from diet culture, and create a lifestyle that they truly want to live while supporting one another as a collective whole of badass women. I am your host, Cheryl D. Guzman, and also the founder of CD Fitness, Conscious Diligent Fitness. We are back on the CD Fitness podcast, and I have a very special guest. Her name is Victoria Dorsano. Just a couple weeks ago, as we were just chatting, Victoria invited me to be a guest speaker at the Health Hive, her virtual coaching group, on the topic of owning your fitness and really taking action based on your unique goals. So we were just kind of sharing about how some of the employees at one of her clients' law office have been taking action, and some of her clients have been taking action on getting movement in and taking ownership of their goals. But a little bit more on Victoria. Victoria's a boss lady. She is the owner of Be Victorious Coaching. She is a health and lifestyle coach who helps business owners and entrepreneurs find sustainable health solutions that are custom curated just for them, so that they can be the healthiest versions of themselves inside and out, at work and at home. Her approach takes into consideration all aspects of well-being: emotional, physical, environmental, mental, existential, and relational, to truly help her clients feel balanced, present, alive, and well. So I'm really excited to have her today here, and also just have this connection and this friendship with Victoria, because I feel like when we first met, we just connected right away and see eye to eye on so many ways of which we support our clients and just live our lives. So it's such an honor to be here and talk with you today, Victoria. This is right around that time when people are really starting to hop the fence from thinking about what to do to taking action on their health again, or maybe reigniting that fire, especially seeing as that this year has been really tough for people in so many ways. So how would you say this year has been treating you so far?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm excited to be here and talking about this in particular. So yeah, I actually just did a presentation on transitioning into thinking about New Year's resolutions and goals and all those things. So a lot of this is fresh in my mind, and this reflection piece is so important. And I think a lot of us, when we move into a new year and we're starting to like you said, kind of jump into that fence where we are thinking about taking action on something, we forget to reflect on where we've been or where we're at currently in our starting point. And I think it's a really important step. So this year, all in all, has been wild, absolutely wild. The whole pandemic thing happening, of course, has been significant. There's been, all the different other cultural things that have popped up as well, and been huge movements in our culture. And on top of that, I mean, just personally, a lot of stuff I kicked off the new year, like literally day one of the new year in 2020 with the flu, like full blown influenza.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was flattened out, like for 2 weeks, just could not move a muscle. So talk about, somebody who's worked on their strength and having a strong
Mhm.
body, being so humbled. Like I started this year feeling so humbled and really acknowledging what it felt like to be, in that state of like just needing help, feeling very helpless and vulnerable. And thankfully I have a wonderful husband now who's helped me, through this process. But that, from there, it really didn't stop. It was once I recovered from that, my father-in-law passed away. When was that?
No.
Late January. So it was really not too much time in between, and grieved through that with my husband. And then 2 weeks after that, I tore my ACL. So it's
Oh,
been
wow.
one thing after the next. And the pandemic really, with the ACL, I had to wait about 90 something days until I could get surgery, because it was considered elective to have the reconstruction done of the ligament. So I waited, and they're like, well, what you can do is really just focus on strengthening your leg and getting it really strong and prepared for surgery. And I was like, okay, I got 90 something days to do this. Let's go. So did that, got the surgery, and all throughout that whole process, I mean, I'm talking like it was boom, 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 but so many emotions brought up, and we can go back
Oh,
and
for
touch
sure.
base on all of that. But just the timeline of how this year has been wild. So I got that surgery done in May, was healing really well, doing all the things I could possibly do to make sure I was really treating my body as well as I could, practicing what I preach, focusing on a different aspect of what recovery looks like versus performance, and taking care of my body in that way. And my surgeon and my therapist were so amazed at how fast I was healing. I was like, yay, I'm doing all the things. And then day 14 post-op, my kneecap fractured in half in physical
Oh, wow.
therapy because my quad was so strong that it pulled the kneecap in half.
No
So
way.
yeah. And I was like, you guys
I'm
told me
just
to strengthen
picturing
it.
that in my head. And of course, like knowing you who's focused and determined to get something done, like you're gonna get after it, you're gonna get after it. And so you're like, I'm gonna build this muscle up.
Exactly,
Kneecap
exactly.
literally tearing in half. Like that must have been
Yeah.
so painful. Was it more painful than tearing your ACL?
Actually it wasn't. It's the ACL, I cannot describe what that felt like because mine was a traumatic. It was somebody else ran into my leg and it popped that way versus me tearing it myself. So it was more of
Mhm.
a traumatic impact. And it was, my bones were bruised on both sides. It was like really, that was a pain I've never experienced before.
Oh
There's
my
not many things
God.
that make me like sit on the floor and just wail and not be able to move. And that was one of those things. I was like in 10 out of 10 pain. Like I just wanted to pass out. But
Wow.
the kneecap fracture really, I don't know what it was. If, my knee had already been through so much at that point and had like a higher receptivity to pain or whatever it might be, but it
Mhm.
was more of a shock. And then the emotional piece that came
For
along with that
sure.
of terror, not knowing what happened, thinking I maybe retore the graft. And so then healing through that was, I had to have my leg locked straight in a brace for 6 weeks after the surgery. And oh my gosh, it was a mess. And I'm still dealing with some stuff on that end of things too. So it's been a year, but amidst all that, I've really gotten to solidify, some of the things like I mentioned that I talk about and teach and really put them into practice like hardcore with myself, and to give myself grace in the process of change and growth and recovery, and
Mhm.
also be able to still be there for my clients and grow my business and all those things too. So it has been a wild year.
Absolutely. I mean, just thinking about your story and the very few minutes that you went through it, I can only imagine all the different ups and downs that you were going through mentally, emotionally, and on top of the fact that there were so many aspects to our life that we had to change as far as like being able to get out and see more people and being able to take your mind off of things by doing some of the things that like you might normally do. But how was it for you being able to stay the course of, because honestly, when if I or anyone else were to meet you, I don't think they would have ever guessed you have gone through all of this year because of your positivity and just your energy and like it's so contagious, but like how do you uphold yourself mentally and emotionally through all of what you've gone through this year?
Man, so really, the first thing I do, and it's something that's I think second nature, and it wasn't for a long time, is really honoring the emotions that come along with any difficulty or any kind of situation that you experience that elicits an emotional reaction. Feel it, like let yourself feel it. I used to repress so many of my own emotions because it wasn't convenient, or it wasn't appropriate, or it wasn't whatever, it wasn't comfortable for somebody else around me. And I learned that I need to let those things come out, even if they're ugly sometimes. Like I
Mhm.
definitely took a baseball bat to a pillow a few times when I, to be honest, like
Nice.
I was so angry and then was crying and then sad and then all those things. So letting those emotions come out first, giving yourself that time and space. But then, when you feel like there's that point where you can get stuck wallowing in self-pity or anger or sadness, you can get stuck there. So make sure you have a negotiation, kind of like an end point. Be like, okay, I'll give myself 2 days of this, of just kind of grieving. For me, the injury was really almost grieving an identity I had to being an athlete. I didn't realize how strong of an identity I had taken from being an athletic person, somebody who moves and functions well with their
Oh, I
body.
just got chills when you said that, like the grieving
Yeah.
process of being an athlete. And I'm going to just pause for a second and interrupt you because although that might feel like it physically, like I think as an athlete, there's still so many mental capacities that you take with you that will carry you over into being an athlete. And even, some of our favorite and best athletes out there have gone through this and still continue to be athletes. So I think you will forever be an athlete, even though this like small sliver of you kind of just like shriveled away in this process. I can definitely understand that part for sure.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it was actually like it was almost like the ego piece of being attached to the
Mhm.
athlete shriveled away, like a good piece that needed to peel off. Or I kind of
Mm.
outgrown, like, how kind of a weird metaphor, but like how beetles kind of shed their exoskeleton or shed their
Mhm.
skin and kind of grow into a new skin. I think that's it was just a transformation process where you grieve one aspect or one piece of something, but then you end up gaining something back. You gain something different that can be even better. And that's really when I decided, okay, I'm going to cut this like 2 day like cry fest off here. I've gotten these emotions out at this point. It's not doing me any good. And I remember just like looking up at Chris, my husband, and be like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with that.
Mhm.
Let's move forward. I'm going to do everything I can and learn from this. And then also the perspective of this isn't my everybody's experience isn't just for them, it's
Mhm.
for other people. That's how the world evolves, and that's how we help our clients, right? We
Mhm.
utilize our own experiences, and the hardships sometimes are part of that. So really focusing on that, this experience isn't all about me, that it's about something that I can bring forth and um, you know help other people through in the future possibly, or even build my own skills up to that I've learned throughout this process to be able to teach other people. That really helped a ton, acknowledging
Mhm.
that this wasn't done to me, it was done for me.
Hmm. Amazing, amazing. I love that. And I love that you're really broadening your view as a coach and just as a human being, because I think in the society that we live in, sometimes it can be really easy to focus on ourselves. Like from the time we were in school, it was like getting good grades, getting graduating, getting a good job, like doing well in your job and making money and making it for yourself. But we forget sometimes that like there's so much more to what our personal goals and desires are and how like that can relate to the collective whole and the collective strength of like sharing that with everyone. And I think that's such the beauty of being a coach or a teacher or someone who works with people on a day-to-day basis on their personal development. And you've really taken your experiences this year, and I'm sure your clients can feel that and like receive that in a way that's so authentic to them, because like you have obviously gone through a ton this year and as everyone else has, so it makes you authentic and a real person. And so has this allowed you to grow deeper in your connections with your clients and kind of grow your business from a mental and from a mental standpoint?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I think, sharing the process, I think I even posted a lot of like crying, crying posts
Mm.
too, because a lot of people do only see the positive side to me. And I could do a really great job at reframing things, reframing negative experiences and making them
Mm.
look fluffy and nice. But the reality is, that's not relatable for a lot of people. Like I wanted to show that I was going through pain and I was going
Mhm.
through a hard time, and not for pity, not that I wanted people to be like, oh, how can I help you? But more
Mhm.
so they realize like that the pain sometimes has to come first, that you have to dive deep into those dark places to really develop that joy and that authenticity that comes from there.
Mhm.
Um, so that was something I was able to definitely share with my clients, but also just share that, the other thing that this injury this year and the pandemic has really, brought to light for me is that I used to have a lot of issues with disordered eating. I won't say it was formally ever diagnosed like clinically as an eating disorder. However, it probably could have been. I just never really sought it to that point. But I definitely suffered from disordered eating in high school and going into my college years. And as an athlete, you're always trying to eat to perform. So you don't really know what nourishing your body looks like sometimes from a standpoint of just living when you're not performing. And it really, this injury in the pandemic and not being able to go to the gym or work out or do the things that I normally would, brought up a lot of that stuff. It brought
Oh,
up
for sure.
a lot of the
Same.
things that I thought, yeah, that I thought I had moved past. And I was like, oh my gosh, these
It's
things are still,
resurfacing.
yeah, I was like, they're still here. Okay, I gotta work on this still. So not only did it help me, connect with them in the way of showing them my journey through this, but it also helped me connect with them on the same level that, some of my clients are experiencing with disordered eating and with coming off of diet culture and kind of
Mm-hmm.
detoxing from it. I got to be humbled and brought to that level again of what that feels like and really relate to that process and be honest with them. As a coach, sometimes it's hard to say, me too. I'm sometimes at where you're at right now. And I get it because you sometimes want to come from a perspective of, oh, I've passed that. But
Mm-hmm.
again, like that relation piece is so important. And I think letting people know that us coaches are real people too, that we go through our own stuff and we have the platform to be able to share that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really incredible.
Absolutely. Yes. I think the pandemic really allowed us a lot of time to turn back inwards towards ourselves and see some of like the emotions, but also some of the unresolved internal battles that we were going through that just never got resolved, or like just never we never kind of closed the door on some of those chapters. And I think for me, one thing that I've recognized throughout the pandemic was when I did this challenge called the 75 hard challenge, where you're like working out twice a day, and it's like this mental toughness challenge. You follow a quote unquote diet, and um, you're reading a book each day for 10 minutes, and one of your workouts has to be outdoors, and there's these like parameters that really did push me. But I think it opened me up into seeing like two things. Like one, I am very determined to like finish and complete and go hard at the things like the athletes we know that we are. But then two, it opens up this door to like of me almost over obsessing over exercise again, like really restricting myself with food, and like just being so, I had to take daily progress pictures. And this could be a really great challenge for anyone. And I'm not putting it down, but I think what I'm trying to say is that like going through that, if it were any other time in the world, I would have just been like, okay, yeah, I did it, and walked away from it. But going through that process was kind of triggering for me because I was like, there's things that I'm doing in this challenge that don't make me feel great. And now I can understand where my clients are coming from. Like
Yeah.
sometimes when they have come to me and said that they've followed a certain diet, or they've been told um, somewhere or have read somewhere that they need to do cardio 5 times a week or every day, and there's so much information out there, and I'm like, this is what it feels like. And it's really not about those hardcore restrictions following the external guidelines of what is going to lead us to a greater life. Like, yes, that can make me mentally stronger and show that I'm committed, but removing myself from that and then learning that I can listen to my own internal cues about when I'm hungry, how much food to eat, like how to exercise during what times of day work best for me. Like there's so much that I took from that experience that I could transition into, like we were talking about, shedding this part of me that used to be so rigid and so regimented, into someone that's being more fluid and kind of like listening to the internal cues as opposed to the external cues. And that's where I'm really looking to move my coaching. And I feel like that's a lot of what you somewhat teach of kind of like
taking in your internal cues and your internal goals and your unique differences, and using that to drive your success, as opposed to the way that a lot of the fitness industry delivers is like, follow this plan, follow this diet, get to these results, and then you're successful. So it's really like breaking through first what were a lot of my own barriers around fitness, and then now translating that. So I feel like I'm in the transition phase too, and that wouldn't have really happened if it weren't for this pandemic and reflecting on so much of this.
Yeah, there's so much to be thankful for that. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really amazing thing to be able to take that and those experiences and relate them back to where your clients are and understanding that. And I always say like, I think it's really important to build, I call it like your internal six pack before you build your external, like physical six pack, like working on the emotions, working on, your mindfulness, working on
Mhm.
sensing your internal cues of what feels healthy genuinely for you individually as a person, and understanding that first before stepping into, following a plan or doing those
Mhm.
things adds so much more like just depth and value to the experience of doing, any kind of workout or fitness routine, or finding what health looks like for you. I think that's such an important thing. And you're right, like the traditional way that the fitness industry looks at health and fitness is different. A lot of times it's starting external and then not
Mhm.
necessarily even moving in from there all the time.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, that's why it's so important to have coaches like yourself and, what I do, and really that are living it and understanding those challenges that we as women especially go through, and what we're
Mhm.
marketed with. And everybody, I want to like warn all the women out there, I don't know when this is going to be posted, but January 1st, like do not pay attention to any of the diet culture marketing, because that's where 80% of their budget goes, is like New Year's marketing
Mhm.
for weight loss plans and crazy stuff. So yeah, it's something to definitely watch out for.
Yeah, and I think a big reason why so many of these like unresolved internal battles within ourselves and our relationship to our food and to our body were not really like something we fully healed from or kind of grew out of, was because it's just so normalized in our society. Like it's so normalized to idealize getting smaller or losing weight or looking a certain way. And it's just a cycle that seems to continue year after year. And it just astounds me as a, like you mentioned, 80% of marketing budgets for diets are around January. And that is insane.
Yeah, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. So yeah, I think, if anybody's out there listening and they're looking to, find something that works for them, reach out to Cheryl, reach out to me, whoever you
Hmm.
wanted to talk to, but making sure you find somebody that's going to like help you find the right resources that are going to suit you and really lead you to health, and what true health is. Because and going back to kind of what you were mentioning about it being so societally accepted to have these kind of open wounds and let those guide us. It's just, even as far as something that like I really want to work on next year, is not using and being mindful of like diet talk that I utilize that I don't necessarily conceptualize as being diet talk. For example, if I were to come up to you, Cheryl, and be like, man, Cheryl, you look good. You look like so fit. You look like you've lost weight. And it's like, no, I should really be coming to you and be like, Cheryl, you seem so light, like energetic and
Hmm.
bright, and you have such a positive aura. All these other things you can say about somebody that aren't about their body and what their body looks
Right.
like currently. And that's something that, that's a tough one for me to break. And I didn't realize how much I do it, or at least fall into it when
Yeah.
somebody says that, or there's a conversation regarding that. And something I'm definitely trying to be more mindful of next year.
Definitely. And it's not even just with our clients, like we definitely can hear ourselves potentially saying that within our group of friends or in our families. And it's again been so normalized. But I heard this one quote. I was listening to a podcast, and I can't remember the reference of it at the moment, but she's a big advocate of, anti-diet culture and just kind of celebrating health at every size, and appreciating all women of all different bodies and all people of different sizes. And so one of the quotes that she was saying was just like, the way that we look is technically the least interesting thing about us. So why do we talk so much about it if there's like
Yes.
everything else about us that is so much more interesting?
Right? It's so true. It's so true. And yet our culture just puts so much value on that, or, just so much pressure to look a certain way. And it's not actually what, makes you, a valuable person at the end of the
Mhm,
day. It's really the experiences you've gone through and who you are internally.
mhm. Yeah, so definitely working with coaches like ourselves that start with and work with doing the inner work alongside you is really important. So just something to keep in mind for people who are listening. But I wanted to ask you if you can recall or maybe share, without identifying someone by name, but any client that sticks out to you that may have experienced this level of resilience through this tough year, and how that's shown up in their life, either as an entrepreneur or a parent or a business owner. How have you seen this in maybe one of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, several of them in different facets. I mean, there's been one in particular that's taken to really, really work on um, breaking some generational patterns and some things, like something that I teach that is, I think, a really important step in getting healthier is establishing healthy boundaries. We're not
Mhm,
taught how to do that, and if you've experienced somebody that's narcissistic in your life, or had a parent that is a little bit, more on the narcissistic side of things, it really kind of warps your sense of establishing healthy boundaries. And
mhm,
until you can set healthy boundaries on yourself and your time and your space and what you need, it's really hard to implement any kind of fitness routines or any kind of health changes, because you're constantly wanting to please the narcissist around, or please, so and so, or it just
mhm.
develops into a coping mechanism. And I don't know if you've heard of this, Cheryl. It's called fawning. So they have fight, flight, freeze, and now
Mhm.
fawning, which is like people pleasing, is another kind of sympathetic nervous system response to
Wow.
being attacked in a sense. So one client in particular has really been working on that, and she's become so resilient through this process of
Mm,
even dealing with having her father pass away during this year as well, and really learning how to set those healthy boundaries with her family and to put
mhm,
herself first, even during a pandemic when there's so much going on. Um, she's learning how to put herself first so that she can care for those around her that
mhm,
she truly loves. And it's not necessarily in a selfish way, it's more so we have to fill our cups up first
mhm,
before we can really pour out into other people. And I think her resilience through this process with dealing with COVID and being able to continuously work on setting those healthy boundaries so that she can continue to evolve in her health and well-being has been so beautiful to see, and
mhm.
inspirational to other people in the group program too.
I love that. I love that you teach so many aspects of well-rounded health. From what's going on physically to what's going on back within ourselves, and just the support of your clients, and pushing them through consistently showing up and doing that in order to kind of thrive in their environment is really inspirational, because it like, whether you're working with one person or a group of 20, or later down the line when you've had thousands and thousands of clients, and maybe you already have, but like, you'll always remember what that felt like to help that client through some of their hardest or darkest times, and to see them come out through on the other side, or just, be more of themselves with that within them, is really, really moving. And I'm really glad to hear about how you've helped her this year. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. How about you? How any like really big success stories that you've seen happen and how they've demonstrated resilience in your client group?
Yes, definitely. Yes. The same as what you mentioned, as far as so many of them have really shown up in different ways to be resilient throughout, despite the circumstances of the pandemic, of the economy, of just relationships that, they were maybe kind of pushing through. But one client in particular, she is someone who, starting this year, really wanted to focus on her health. And she's kind of always been into it, but in and out of phases of being fit and eating well, and putting herself first. And she is someone who also would consider herself that in that category of people pleasing. But when she made the commitment this year, it really started with the basics, just moving more, tracking the types of food she's eating. And her goal was really to feel lighter, to feel more joyful. It wasn't necessarily about weight loss. And so making that her goal also just paid off tenfold in so many ways, because it allowed her to recognize when she was feeling like she outgrew something. So, for example, she was living in a place that was highly stressful, somewhat of a threat for her. And so she decided that her and her partner were going to move into another space, which brought her more joy, more energy, more light, which fed into her goal. And as we moved towards the end of the year, something she shared with me was, after all of this practice, even though I wasn't going to the gym every single day or eating perfectly every single day, I had my end of the year annual review with my boss, and she said I did an amazing job. I was one of the top performers, and I earned myself a merit raise of 6% at my job. And I was like, that is incredible. Like, despite everything that has been going on this year, and like the fear of maybe not even knowing if you're going to have a job or what's going to happen next, she just felt so happy. Like a huge weight was lifted off of her shoulders, and her first initial goal of feeling lighter really came to fruition. And she just manifested that through continuing to stay connected, sharing with the group through her struggles as well as her successes, and staying positive. Our mindset, just like you have kind of shared throughout the course of this podcast, our mindset and the thoughts and the words that we use to speak with ourselves really can drive what is going to be the outcome of what's next, right? We can wallow in it for days and weeks, and a year goes by and nothing's really changed. Or we can say, okay, I'm going to put a pause to, or stop to that part, and just stay positive and do everything that I can at the best of my ability. And I was just so proud to see her thrive in the way that you have, and in the way that so many of my clients and even some of my friends and colleagues, like, going through this year has been, although difficult, like very satisfying in a way. Like, I think the whole world is really just like shifting to this new place of growth. And I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful.
Yeah, you're so right about that. And it's like, just an aspect of, and again, like, I'm trying not to say this in a way that's disrespectful towards the people who have really experienced a lot of hardship during this time, but to be grateful, even despite that, a lot of families have become closer. I remember when the pandemic first happened and it was still springtime and it was warmer outside, and I mean, to see families doing like writing chalk on their driveways. And I'm like, oh man, I feel like I'm in the 90s again. This is awesome. Like, kids were doing like skip-its, and I was like, oh, I remember those.
Totally.
It was so great to see like families outside.
I was one of those people too.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah,
That's
I was
awesome.
living with my family in the beginning of the pandemic, and in the beginning, like I said, I was very much like, okay, there's a lot of people in this house. I remember growing up in this house. It feels very different. Things are run differently than I would, but kind of just brought us closer together. And it was like, if we're going to all be here anyway, might as well like make the best of it, like share the food that I like cook with them, and not be ashamed of like, how different it is from Filipino food. And that's okay. Not as good, but it's, sharing my lifestyle with them. And it turned things around. And although it wasn't in my plans to go move back home after I had already moved out the first time, I knew that if it weren't for this pandemic, like I would have felt that way throughout the whole thing. Like, why am I here? Like, oh, like
Yeah.
it's too crowded. And and I think that attitude for gratitude was very much so relevant, and it humbled me and allowed me to make space for really welcoming my family like into my life again as an adult, because it was like kind of this blurred line from childhood into adulthood, and like trying to strike that balance of where the family is and how they play a part. And I'm so thankful for that. But it was really
Yeah.
cool to have that experience again.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. It gave us all time to also like just pause and see and take inventory on like those connections in our life with our family, with those people that are close and important to us and that we really value. And really the importance of having, I think the world kind of previous to this was going in a direction where you could have maybe a lot of friends, but they were all kind of on the surface. And I think this really
Mhm.
solidified the necessity to have deeper connections with people who really know you, know where you're at, and can just pick up the phone and call you, and you guys can just pick up a conversation
Mhm.
and like pretend like there's been no time or space in between the last conversation you had, and really just understand like the heart of those around you. I think it
Mhm.
just really allowed me to see how important those really deep connections are in my life, and how much I value those with my family and with my really close friends and my
Mhm.
husband, and how to continuously also learn how to curate those from a really authentic standpoint and continuously water them, because they're
Mhm.
like plants, right? We can't
Yeah.
just say, hey, you're there, it's not a succulent, it's more so like a like a fern. It needs a little bit more water.
Definitely. I love that analogy. It's amazing to see that we both individually and also with our communities and our clients are doing so much of this inner work with folks after this really eye opening year. But looking forward into the next year, what would you say you're really most excited about?
Yeah, and I am just excited about I think seeing people take some of these lessons, take this resiliency and start to implement it, across the board in all areas of their lives moving forward. I'm really excited to see how the world does that, and how things continue to shift and change for the better after coming out of this. And just I think it's just that, like that. I'm so super excited to see where my clients go next year and
Hmm.
see, because they've grown so much. This year's really forced everyone to develop that resilience. And when you have that foundation of resilience, there's so much more you can build on. Like it's just such a more firmer foundation to build upon. And I'm really excited to see what is built on that foundation.
Definitely. I agree with you. I couldn't have said it any better. So, again, thanks so much for chatting with us today, Victoria. I'm really looking forward to see how many more people will be able to help this year. And, whether it's directly or through something like a podcast or even a social media post or a phone call that we choose to make. I really think that the work that we're doing is so important. And for anyone who might want to get in contact with you, or find you on social media, how would they be able to do that?
Yeah, I always say find me on Facebook. That's probably the best way. So if you just go to Victoria Dorsano, it used to be Victoria Helly. I don't know if the system's caught up to that yet, because I think my husband just Googled it the other day and it still was showing up as Victoria Helly. So Victoria Helly, HELLE, or Victoria Dorsano on Facebook, which hopefully is easier to spell, but I could spell it out loud. It's Dorsano. I thought by
Awesome.
switching names it would be easier, but I think people still ask me for the spelling either way.
That's perfect. We could put it in the show notes too and everything. So again, thanks so much. This was really a joy to talk and give like myself even some space. So thank you for kind of holding this space with me to reflect. I'm actually looking forward to doing more reflection this weekend, and just kind of closing up this year feeling strong and hopeful for the next year, built on building on the resilience that we've developed. So thank you,
Yeah,
Victoria.
absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.